Let's go now to Giving USA. It's on page 4 of your seminar manual. And let's talk about this. Giving USA 17 reports calendar 16 numbers. Just came out last month. And calendar 2016 was a very good year. We raised $390 billion with a B dollars. It's a lot of money. Folks, that is more than some countries' entire GDP, and this is money that we're giving away. So in that way, we are one of the most, well, in this way, in real dollars, we're the most generous country on the face of the planet. And I think we get a lot of that sense that giving is good through both I would suggest, both the religious traditions and the civic traditions. This sense that we should be giving and giving back to kind of help those that helped us and to help those who can't help themselves. So we get it kind of through the mother's milk, through both civic and religious traditions. So that's one thing. Now, the not so good news is that this only reflects kind of 1.6% of average household giveaway. So in some ways that gives me hope, because I'm thinking, there's more to be had, per household giveaway. So 1.6%. So there's more to be had. Now let's look at the source of that $390 billion, which is I think it's like an 8% increase over the previous years. Most of that money comes from individuals. A lot of people say when they have a big campaign, they say, Sinclair Towns, we need your help. We're going to need to go to the foundations. We need to raise a lot of money. And let me tell you, where the money is with individuals, live and dead. Because when you add individual giving, which is 72%, and bequests are just dead individuals, we got about 8 cents on the philanthropic dollar coming from individuals, with foundations giving out or about 15% and corporations giving out or about 5%. Okay. Now, what does this tell us? This should inform our strategy, should it not? In where do we go to get the money? The guy was asked, why do you rob banks? It's where the money is. Why do we do what we do? We need to go to where the money is. So that's going to be through individuals. Okay? Most of the money in the United States, the charitable dollar, goes to religion. And it has always been thus. The interesting thing, though, is just within my professional career, that portion of religious giving has gone from 50% to 32%. Okay? So you see that diminution of giving to religion. I can think of different reasons for that. One is that we live in a more secular society than when I was growing up, in Grenada, Mississippi, years and years ago. And here's the other thing. What I am finding, because we do a lot of church-based fundraising, is that churches typically underinvest in resource development. You get health care, invest 20, 25 cents on the dollar, Yeah. Independent schools, maybe 15 cents, something, you know, at or about industry average. Human services, maybe even a little less. Religious churches, about 1 point something percent. I mean, you can see where, you know, they're just not putting quite the resources, and they have not professionalized, you know, with other sectors of the nonprofit area. So, and again, there are reasons for that, but that number has gone from 50 to 32. Education gets the next largest chunk of the money. Human services represented here. And of course, education, the universities are here, independent schools. And then health, Maria, there you are, about 8%. And I'm predicting that that's going to represent a growth area, because healthcare foundations, clearer than anybody, understand the math of resource development, I think, better than anybody. Healthcare systems, the one who are lucky enough to be making margins, are like, have margins of like 1, 2, 3%, you know, if they're lucky. And so in healthcare fundraising, you give healthcare organizations 20 cents, they're going to raise you $1. That's a 500% increase. And your profit is going to be 400%. You know, back away the 20 and you get the 80. So it is easier to put that money into foundation world and get a huge benefit rather than saying swelling, you're spending a lot of money and maybe getting some more, you know, surgery rooms and carving out a 7% return. You know, so that's, you can kind of see where healthcare is really made to order for larger investments. Now, that being said, there's always, I took business at Ole Miss, and I remember something in my economics class, and that is diminishing returns. There is a point where you can invest and you can go up exponentially, and then there's a point where it tips and goes the other way. So I am aware of that dynamic. I have not bumped into that dynamic in any of my clients as yet in all these years. Nobody has been really over-investing. And if they have been, it would be because they were young, fledgling, new birth nonprofits where they had to ramp up, and it took them 3 or 4 years to kind of get the returns to make them, you know, where the industry standards are. So I want you to also look at the history of this giving. You can see that in 2007 we went from 314, and in 2008 299. The Great Recession, philanthropy took it on the chin, and it was 5 years before we dug ourselves out of that Great Recession hole. It was a real deal. And there were some new normals that we will talk about that emerged from the Great Recession and that trial by fire. Anyway, you can see the real effect of what we went through. Any questions at all about this snapshot of giving? You know, the good thing is that we as development professionals are inheritors of this philanthropic tradition. And we are also guardians of that tradition, being who we are in the development professional world. So it is up to us to kind of carry on the torch and to grow and professionalize such that we can do the great work that we do through the nonprofit sector. Giving USA is an organization, and they have been together a long time. I like them because they've been at it so long. They've kind of refined their methodologies, through the years. There is no silver bullet on getting this information. I would imagine most of their information comes from 990s, that all nonprofits have to follow. But I think they also have some other ways to kind of sample populations, to kind of metric movement and things like that. But I think basically it's pretty independent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Pat.
If we were to identify ourselves under the uses of contributions as a religious, educational, human services, health type entity, do we water down our ability to collect on each one of those, or is it a cumulative effect?
Well, I think by definition you're going to be plugged into the human service.
All right.
Okay. But the fact is, you need to also understand that you do have that religious orientation. You are a part of health. So in some ways in your marketing and communications, you're going to have to use that communication frequency to kind of the different points of orientation within your constituency. But I think your numbers go into the human service compilation. So, does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I want to talk about philanthropy's spectrum of giving. People give for different reasons. Let's talk about some of those reasons. Why do people give? Why do people not give? Let's kind of just move through this together.
Passion.
Passion, okay. Connection with the ministry or whatever.
Ministry, the cause.
Simply just to help.
To help.
Need to help.
Exactly. And that could be because you received help, or we're helping those who can't help themselves, but to help, to do good.
Carry on the family tradition sometimes.
Kind of that legacy. Noblesse oblige, to those who are given much, much is expected. That kind of sense of things.
And sometimes for tax purposes.
The tax deduction. Yeah.
People always say that, but isn't that really lower on the list of reasons why people give?
It may be insofar as incentive, but the tax deduction really plays a role in how much you get. Not maybe the motivation, but the amount you give. I grew up, again, small, poor town in Mississippi, and I grew up with a very pejorative view of the government. It's like the government can do no good. But let me tell you, to its credit, Congress has wired the laws in this complex way, but has wired the laws in such a way that giving not only helps the organization that is the recipient organization, but it also helps the donor from a tax-wise point of view, such that you are able as a donor to give more for less because of the ways the tax laws are written. We can get more or less. That's why the tax incentive really helps on the amount bounds more than a motivation. But let me tell you, if somebody wants to give because to get a tax deduction, we can help them. If that's their motivation, I'm going to meet them right there. In some ways, it's all the same, because there is that phase of life where you're in the wealth accumulation phase, and then you're kind of in the wealth retention growth phase, and then you're in the wealth distribution phase. So there is that kind of age curve on the natural unfolding of one's life and career. I guess the thing that I'm concerned about, that I see so much creativity and passion, within the young millennials. But I don't think that they, by numbers, are nearly as connected to that religious tradition for giving. Because, let me tell you, I mean, where I grew up in the Bible Belt South, people just, it's just what you did, you just went to, to church. So there was that formation there. And I'm not sure, in looking at my son's a rising junior at Georgia Bulldog. That close I had him to go to Ole Miss, but all his friends went to Georgia. So thank God Ole Miss beat Georgia this year. But anyway, I see his age group, and his group of friends are nearly as steeped in that religious tradition. Now, that is not to say, not reason to lose hope, because there are other ways and avenues of getting this sense that it is a good thing to be giving back, and so it just kind of remains to be seen how this is going to play out. But they are certainly great at expanding donor-based numbers. I mean, acquisition, with all they do with this, text to give and things like that. We're getting we're getting some good numbers. Our trick is to be able to capture that acquisition and grow them, into giving that is more in line with their portfolio potential, and that takes a lot of education, cultivation, wooing. It's a relationship business. And as my Calder crassly said, you got to pretend like you care with these people. It really is, in some ways, I approach development as pastoral in instinct. You just got to lock in on all the whys and wherefores of why people give and why they do what they do. So anyway, one of the main reasons people give is because they were asked. And we are in the invitation extending business. We are sowing the seeds of the ask. And, we're only going to bat what? We'll go into this, we'll go to the metrics of this, but I'll tell you now, we're only going to bat 250 or 333. We're going to hear more no's than yeses. But anyway, we are in the asking invitation business. Okay. Now, I want to spend a little time doing this. At Candler, I learned a lot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where kind of first the seed, then the blade, then the flower. The lower supports the higher. You got to have food, and then you have shelter, and once these needs are met, you can kind of go on to the higher order of human need and desires. So Maslow learned a lot about Kohlberg's theory of moral development, and starts with basic trust, and once you have that basic trust, that's the foundation upon which you can build higher orders of relationships, commitment and things like that in human development. Also, I was at Camera when Jim Fowler came out with Stages of Faith, where they kind of marked the various, it was almost sociological in its approach about how faith develops and it forms a pattern. Well, they've even done some of this work in our sector of philanthropy. There is this spectrum of giving, and it's very sequential, and the lower supports the higher. So it starts something like this, and you see it on page 5. First, on the spectrum, there is the non-giver. There's just somebody who's, not going to do it, not going to participate. And then there's that person who gives, but they give to avoid pain. It's like the mother saying, Johnny, if you don't give that toy to Susie, you're going to be punished. Well, Johnny's going to get the toy to Susie because he's given to avoid pain. So that's kind of the first measurements of giving, as infantile as it is. But it's better than not giving. And then you move up the evolutionary cycle, and it is the quid pro quo giver. It is tit for tat. It is, I'll give to you, but you give to me. It is serial reciprocity. Kind of what goes around comes around, quid pro quo. Okay? And then there is this kind of jump in the spectrum of a fair share giver. And that is someone who says, how much are you raising? Well, how many people do you have in your constituency? They do the math and they say, I'm going to give my fair share. Whether I get quo back or not, I want to give my fair share. Okay? So a lot of people, they're good at the math. And they don't want to be, they're a little worried about being too far out there in their giving. And then there is this wonderful creature called the patron, and they take up a good swath of the spectrum. And the patron is someone who knows what it is her fair share. They can do the math. But a patron says, this organization has meant so much to me, my family, my community. I know the math. I know what it is my fair share, but I want to give more than my fair share. I want to be a patron. And God loves me. These are generous people, generous folk. Okay. Up until this point on the spectrum of giving, people are giving to a need. They hear a case, they give to a need. Okay? We're addressing needs. That's all good. And then, beyond patron, something happens. There is an internal gear shift of motivation from giving to a need to developing a sense that I need to give. I need to give for my own human fulfillment. That giving is rich and it is life-giving. And religious people have a term for this. They call it a conversion. But you don't have to be religious, because a lot of times this conversion just happens just through the general sense of life unfolding and, you know, following the bliss. So now a lot of people have this conversion and they would say become tithers, this sense that giving is good, it's a joyous thing, and there are some standards that kind of feed that, and there are those that tithe. You just can't outgive goodness. But tithers still kind of count. They're still kind of metric people, 10%. That's where the tithing comes from. And then you got the joyful giver, who kind of, you know, these are the people who are diving off the board, you know, just full out. And it is a faith step, it is a trust step. You just, there is more, it is better to give than to receive. There's that kind of sense of moving into the world, and there's a lot of internal motivation there, okay? So that is the sense of how giving unfolds in kind of human development. First the seed, then the blade, then the flower. Now, folks, I can promise you, among your donor constituency, there's going to be all types. All types, different people give for different reasons, for different reasons, you know. And what I'm suggesting is that we become familiar with this spectrum to kind of get a sense of what's motivating people. And I think our task is to meet them where they are. I don't take it upon myself and take on the responsibility of moving people along, although I hope for everybody to have a rich life, you know. But I think I want to meet people where they are and understand this is kind of, you know, where their trigger is, and then just you know, let their own development take its own life, and just hope you can be a part of it.